Hey everybody, it's Retro DM Ray with you again. Sorry for another long pause between videos. Again, life has kind of gotten in the way there, but I'm back with you today, and I'm going to start my series of going through the BFRPG or Basic Fantasy role-playing game. I'm going to be reading through several places within this game. This, I think, is just a really, really awesome game. It's very similar to BX in many ways, but as we read through it, you'll be able to immediately hear the differences as well. It's really a back to basics just push, just like my videos are talking about back to basics. This is really a very, very good representation of this idea of going back to basic and relearning how to play Dungeons and Dragons. And so I thought the first thing that I would do is kind of start out where Chris Gonnerman has written on the back of the Basic Fantasy RPG book. And just to let you know, if you want to pick up this book, hey, if you have Amazon Prime, you can get all of the Basic Fantasy role-playing game materials that are out. As far as in print from Amazon, you can bundle them all together, get them shipped for free to your house. I did that for around $40. There's no other game system where you can get all of the book and all of the adventures and all of the campaign material and everything all in one thing together. Excellent prints. Excellent binding. You can also get all of this entire game and everything that they have on their website at basicfantasy.org. And on the back of his book, Chris Gonnerman's book here, and really, I spoke with Chris in private message, and he specifically told me it's not just him. It is a collaborative effort, and he's right, a collaborative effort with a great group of folks that have put this game together. Of course, Chris being the lead author on all of this, obviously. But he says on the back of the book, first thing he says is Basic Fantasy role-playing game is a new game with a rules-light mechanic designed for the kind of gameplay popular in the early days of role-playing games. The look and feel is classic, from the races, classes, spells, monsters, and magic items included, down to the very typeface and layout chosen. And I would totally agree. If you look at the typeface here and look at the old stuff, it matches up almost identically. Just the feel of this is exactly as he said. It is very, very classic in its look and in its feel. He says, this is old school. Modern game systems are heavy, both in terms of sheer weight of the books as well as the amount the players and game master must learn to play them. Here in this volume are all the rules needed to create and run adventures the old-fashioned way. An experienced player can create and equip a character in under 10 minutes, and even a novice can be ready to play in under half an hour. Game masters will find that the brief and simple rules for monsters and magic make the job of adventure creation just as easy. Combat can be completed by moderately experienced players with little or no need to stop and look up rules. And then the very next section, I just absolutely love this approach. This is what sealed the deal for me as far as a game. And having played it with my kids and my wife, I can tell you it sealed it for me as well. But the back of the book says, don't buy this book. Now, I don't know about you, if you go to a gaming shop and you see this on the shelf and you see that on the back of it, the gaming shop owners are probably not really looking at the material they're purchasing if they don't want you to buy the book. But hold on there for a second, and he'll tell you why. He says, well, not anyway. The Basic Fantasy role-playing game rules are available for free on our website, www.basicfantasy.org. There you will also find adventures, alternate rules, and other supplementary materials to enhance your game. Now, if you don't want to print the rules out yourself, please do buy this book and enjoy. And I would agree. Go to the website, go check that all out like he's directing you to. There's just some wonderful, wonderful, basic, classic feel stuff on there. It's just a really, really great game. And I hope that you're going to enjoy as we kind of go through this. I won't read everything word for word from every single page of the book. I encourage you to go on their website, download the third edition, which is the one I'm going to be going through. Follow along if you want, take a look at it yourself. And if you like that, you know you're going to use that, certainly by all means support those different collaborators and Chris and go out and get this for yourself. But we're just going to go through this game that was originally produced in 2006. This third edition came out originally in 2016. And I will open the front here, and I'm just going to read you the introduction and part one, and this will give you an immediate classic feel. Introduction, this is on the first page. It was our third foray into the dungeons beneath the ancient fortress in the middle of the river. We were on the second level down from the ruins, standing before the great bronze doors beyond which we believed lay the tomb of an ancient barbarian chieftain. I hadn't believed the tales of the old drunk at the tavern back at Morgan's Fort, but for some reason, Apoculus, the cleric, believed him. Turned out his stories were true. Mostly, anyway. I held a torch for Barthel the thief as he tried briefly to pick the lock. He turned around and said, "It must be held by magic. The lock won't even wiggle." Morningstar the elf smiled. "I have just the thing," she said, drawing from her backpack the scroll we took from the goblins. She unrolled it and began to read. And though I couldn't understand her words, I could see the characters burning away as she read them, little wisps of smoke as from a candle rising up from each in turn. Seeing that she was nearly through, I turned my attention to the lock. I'm not sure what I was expecting, but the little puff of dust that came from it as she finished didn't seem like much. She turned to Barthel and said, "Try again." I'm tempted to say that Barthel bent to his work, but he's a halfling. At just over 3 feet tall, he could look straight into the lock without stooping a bit. I must have looked impatient as Apoculus leaned over to me and said, "Be still, Darian. He'll be through in a moment or two." Then I heard a loud click, and Barthel turned to me with a smile. "It's open, my friend. After you." I handed him the torch, then stepped to the doors, sword drawn, and Morningstar joined me, likewise ready. I steeled myself and opened the doors. Beyond lay a stone sarcophagus resting upon a raised platform. Strewn about the floor were many human skeletons. Apoculus made a sign with his hand that I didn't recognize. Then we walked in carefully, trying not to trip over the bones. I noticed among the bones several bronze swords covered in verdigris. I stepped to the sarcophagus. "The lid is likely very heavy," I said. "Come, Morningstar, rather than lift it, let's turn it about so we can see what treasures lie inside." Morningstar called, "Wait!" But it was too late. I'd already laid hands upon the sarcophagus. The bones on the floor began to rattle, then rose up and assembled themselves in a mockery of life. Without delay, they picked up their swords from the floor and began to attack us. I would have to wait until later to kick myself, I mused, as I put my back against the sarcophagus and began to fight the monsters. So that right there is just such a most excellent classic feel as an introduction there. I really, really like that. It harkens back to BX for sure. So then he talks about what is this in the next paragraph. He says the basic fantasy role-playing game is a rules-light game system based on the D20 SRD version 3.5, but heavily rewritten with inspiration from earlier role-playing game systems. It is intended for those who are fans of old-school game mechanics. Basic fantasy RPG is simple enough for children in perhaps 2nd or 3rd grade to play, yet still has enough depth for adults as well. So you can see there that he's based the game on the D20 System Reference Document, or SRD version 3.5. So you'll get to see later what that really makes an impact of. But what he does in here is something that, honestly, for our group of players, if we would have thought about doing this, we would have done it way back then too. And Chris, even in one of his videos, actually says the very same thing. If they would have thought about doing it this way, they would have probably done it back then too. And some of our games had house rule things similar to this in place before 3rd edition 3.5 ever even came around. So there are some things in here that are that, and a lot of the rest of the things in here are what I would consider to be BX. Of course, because of licensing issues, you can't really say that about it, but that's really kind of what is at the heart of what's going on here. And then he talks about what is a role-playing game. And he goes through that it's more than 30 years since the first role-playing game appeared, and much has changed. Most people have at least heard the names of one or two such games, and many, many people have played. Still, there are those who have not tried RPGs. If you're one of those people, this part is for you. Then he goes on to explain more about what is a role-playing game, that they're, in effect, role-playing games are just grown-up games of pretend. Then he talks about what you need to play, and he talks about the various dice and using the dice. Again, BX does the exact same thing. Then we move to part 2, which is on page 3, and here's where he talks about how to create a player character. And of course, everything you want to know is listed here. You need a pencil, you need some paper to write down. Actually, because we couldn't afford character sheets when we first started playing, we didn't have character sheets either. We just looked at the example in the book and wrote out our own on paper. Most of our best character sheets actually were ones we could look back and still see that they were chicken scratches on notebook paper, or the old big Indian pads from back in the day, if you remember those. But then he says, roll 3d6 for each ability score, as described in the character abilities section, and write the results after the names of the abilities. Write down the scores in the order you roll them. If you're unhappy with the scores you've rolled, ask your game master for advice, as he or she may allow some form of point or score exchanging. Write down the ability score bonus or penalty for each score beside the score itself, as shown on the table on the next page. So you're rolling straight down the list. A lot of games today tend to allow you to roll more dice than that, and kind of fudge and roll several columns and pick the best of those. And there's nothing wrong with all of those. That's perfectly fine. But I like the idea of, you just roll, and whatever the dice come up as is whatever you are, and that's whatever you're playing, and you make the best of that, and you play, and you turn that zero into a hero, if you will. I really kind of like that idea. It does make it a little scary when you pick up the dice and you roll a bunch of dice, and all you end up with, which is a bunch of 6s, 7s, and 8s. But like he said, you can ask the game master and move some things around, and then write down your penalties or your bonuses accordingly. And then he says, choose your race and your class for your character. Your character must meet the prime requisite minimum for a class, as described in the character classes section, in order to be a member of that class. Also note that there are minimum and maximum ability requirements for the various races which must be met, as described in the character races section. Then write down the special abilities of your race and class choices as described below. If you've chosen to play a magic user, ask your game master what spell or spells your character knows. It's up to the game master to decide this, but he or she may allow you to choose one or more spells yourself. So if you looked at the first edition Dungeon Master's Guide, Gary Gygax and others in there that wrote that, mostly Gary, they give a suggestion of what a starting spell book should have. Maybe 1 offensive, 1 defensive, and 1 or 2 miscellaneous plus read magic, or those types of things. And you could do something very similar to that here. Ultimately, you tailor that however you want to. And kind of go from there. Then he says, note on your character sheet that your character has 0 experience points. Also, you may want to note the number needed to advance to 2nd level, as shown in the table for your class. Now, here's another scary part. Roll the hit die appropriate for your class, adding your constitution bonus or penalty, and note the result as your hit points on your character sheet. Note that should your character have a constitution penalty, the penalty will not lower any hit die below 1. So if your character has a -2 penalty for Constitution and you roll a 2, the total is adjusted to 1. Now, can you imagine? You roll a bunch of 6s, 7s, and 8s, right? Maybe even just a bunch of 9s, and then you go to roll your hit die, and you end up rolling for a cleric, for example, and the cleric himself actually uses a d6 for hit points. So you have a 1st level cleric and you roll 1 and you get no pluses. So you start out the game with 1 hit point. And, the first wolf you encounter on the road that successfully attacks you, and you're dead. So there's some extreme example of lethality built into the game right there. But also, what an incredible amount of role playing opportunity that here you have. Friar weakling, if you will, they can't barely survive a strong breeze, and yet you can manage to play that character, and you can manage to survive. You can actually manage to level up over a long period of time and actually thrive with the rest of your party. And you can look back on that character and say, hey, when I first started out, I had nines and everything. I didn't have any of my items or my special boons from Magic Fountain or whatever might have boosted your stats, or wish spells or something like that. I didn't have any of that to raise my stats back when I first started, and I only started out with 1 hit point, and yet here I am today, a 20th level cleric. I just think that would be such a really, really cool story to be able to tell. Then he talks about rolling your starting money. Generally, your character will start with 3d6 times 10 gold pieces, but ask the game master before rolling. Now purchase your equipment for your character as shown in the cost of weapons and equipment section below. Write your purchases on your character sheet and note how much money remains afterward. Make sure you understand the weapon and armor restrictions for your class and race before making your purchases. Yeah, so also this old school feel, they had something else too, right? You tracked what equipment you had, what kind of shape that equipment was in, how much of it you had. Did you have enough equipment on to protect you and to fight back? Were you able to carry all of that and move effectively? Did you have enough food? Did you have enough water? Those kind of provision things. Were you able to have things with you that might be able to provide light or might be able to provide shelter, for example, if you had enough strength to be able to carry that kind of stuff? And those things mattered in the old school. We tracked them back then. And I think that's lost in many of the games today in various ways. And if you don't track those things and you don't want to track those things in your game, and that's cool with you and your group, hey, that's fine. I just think that for us, it was just something extra cool that we did that just helped you to have more of that verisimilitude, more of that feeling like it was real, that you had to keep track of those things and you had to drag those things around. And what would it be like to drag all those things down into the dungeons and the crypts with you and carry all that stuff around? And what would happen when you fell off of a crevice into a small underground river below? What would happen to your equipment? And all those kinds of things that just kind of made it make a little more sense and at least got it closer to reality at times. I think that's just really, really cool to do. But if you don't do that, that's cool. You just kind of play whatever is fun for you. But you write those purchases down on your sheet, and then you note how much money remains afterwards. Yeah, because when you travel to other towns, you're going to need to buy other things like rooms to stay and a livery stable to put up your mounts if you happen to have those, or get those during the course of your adventuring, repairs to your equipment, upgrading and buying new things, paying for spells to be cast for you and various things. So keeping track of that was important as well. And then understand the weapon and armor restrictions for your class and race before you make your purchases. Then he says, since you now know what sort of armor your character is wearing, you should note your armor class on your character sheet. Don't forget to add your dexterity bonus or penalty to the figure. Okay, so automatically you see something right there. There's something to do with addition in relation to armor class as opposed to the older first edition basic system, which was to subtract from your armor class, making it lower. So yes, as you'll see, armor class is ascending in basic fantasy role-playing game. And that's one of those things that I talked about earlier. If we would have thought about how to do that back in the day, instead of trying to do this crazy negative number system and this crazy Thaco system, which don't get me wrong, I love that too. But if we would have thought about it back then, we would have ditched that way back then and had positive facing numbers and had ascending AC and pluses for attack rolls and stuff like that as hitting positive numbered armor classes, like even in 5th edition, that kind of an idea, which came from 3rd edition 3.5, right? So you can see that right there. And then he says, look up your character's attack bonus, again a plus, right? And note it on your character sheet. Don't add your ability bonuses or penalties to this figure, as you will add a different bonus, strength or dexterity, depending on the sort of weapon you use in combat, i.e. melee or missile weapon. Also, look up your saving throws from the tables near the end of the encounter section and note them on your character sheet. Adjust the saving throw figures based on your race. If your character is a demi-human, see character races below, please note that the saving throw bonuses for demi-humans are presented as plus values to be added to the die roll. For convenience, you may simply subtract them from the saving throw numbers on your sheet instead. So you could either write them down and having already done the math, or you can leave the number as written and just know that you have pluses. Because again, you're rolling and adding to that. Now, the old saving throw system, you had to roll that number higher, so this was not much of a change, right? You add that number, you had to beat that number higher in the old system, so in this one you roll your dice, add your plus, and you have to equal that number or higher in this basic fantasy role-playing game as well. Okay, then he says, finally, if you haven't done so already, name your character. This often takes longer than all the other steps combined. Yes, because if you don't know what your stats are like and you don't know what hit points you got, because you've picked just class so far, maybe just racing class so far, then yeah, you may not necessarily name your person yet because they may not survive past like the first hour in the game, right? So this might take a lot longer to do. So you might want to have yourself a scratch sheet with just a list of like 8 or 10 different names on it for like when this guy or this gal dies, maybe I'll use this name on the list now, and just keep going. Because I think the ultimate point with this game system in Basic Fantasy and in Basic was your focus is not that the character itself is the be-all and end-all of everything, and then when that character dies, you just freak out and you can't play anymore. That's character-centric and character sheet-centric focused gaming, and this old-school system, the old-school way of playing was game play centric focused, and your characters were, yes, fun to play and part of that, and you didn't want them to die, but ultimately if they did, you still wanted to keep playing the game. You still wanted to continue to go forward with that dungeon master and the game and enjoy those experiences, whatever character on a piece of notebook paper you had in front of you. And I think that's the emphasis here a little bit, in that the name comes last, right? And maybe they did not mean that by implication, but that's kind of the way that I took that. Then you see on page 4, he's automatically talking about character abilities in such a way as it's a positive that's different than the BX system. It says each character will have a score ranging from 3 to 18 in each of the following abilities, a bonus or penalty associated with each score. That's pretty standard, right? Each class has a prime requisite ability score, which must be at least 9 in order for the character to become a member of that class. Again, pretty typical. Also, there are required minimum and maximum scores for each character race other than humans. And then the chart here starts at an ability score of 3 and works to 18. But 3 is a -3 penalty. 4 to 5 is a -2. 6 to 8 is a -1. 9 to 12 is a 0. 13 to 15 is a +1. 16 to 17 is a +2. And 18 is a +3. So the pluses are not that huge, and the gaps are a little bit bigger. So there's a little bit of wiggle room in there to roll some average lower scores and still come out okay. You know, if you roll a whole bunch of 9s, you don't have any pluses, but you also have no minuses. So there's nothing wrong with that. And then he has a write-up. They have a write-up for each of the ability scores. I'll read through those. And then once I finish that particular section, we'll probably be done with the video for this time. And then next time when we come back, I will talk about hit points and hit dice. We'll get into some languages, and then I will read through the races that are just in the 3rd edition Basic Fantasy role-playing game book here. So let's go along with strength. As the name implies, this ability measures the character's raw physical power. Strength is the prerequisite for fighters. Apply the ability bonus or penalty for strength to all attack and damage rolls in melee hand-to-hand combat. Note that a penalty here will not reduce damage from a successful attack below 1 point in any case. See the combat section for details. Intelligence. This is the ability to learn and apply knowledge. Intelligence is the prime requisite for magic users. The ability bonus for intelligence is added to the number of languages the character is able to learn to read and write. If the character has an intelligence penalty, he or she cannot read more than a word or two and will only know his or her native language. Wisdom, a combination of intuition, willpower, and common sense. Wisdom is the prime requisite for clerics. The wisdom bonus or penalty may apply to some saving throws versus magical attacks, particularly those affecting the target's will. Dexterity. This ability measures the character's quickness and balance as well as aptitude with tools. Dexterity is a prime requisite for thieves. The dexterity bonus or penalty is applied to all attack rolls with missile, ranged weapons, to the character's armor class value, and to the character's initiative die roll. Constitution, a combination of general health and vitality. Apply the Constitution bonus or penalty to each hit die rolled by the character. Note that a penalty here will not reduce any hit die roll to less than 1 point. And lastly, we have Charisma. This is the ability to influence or even lead people. Those with high charisma are well liked or at least highly respected. Apply the charisma bonus or penalty to reaction rolls. Also, the number of retainers a character may hire and the loyalty of those retainers is affected by charisma. So you can see the different ability scores there, very similar to the descriptions in BX, and yet some modifications there. So I hope that as we've just been reading a little bit through that, and I've been making some commentary along the way, that you find this useful, that I really hope that you consider picking up the Basic Fantasy Role-Playing Game by Chris Gonerman and the rest of the team. I would encourage you to do that, being that it's $5 to print out this, to get this book in a nicely bound copy from Amazon. You can also get you a hardback version from lulu.com. I don't remember the cost for that. I think it's $10 or something like that, but you can check it out for yourself. Certainly go to the website basicfantasy.org. You can download everything and look at everything for completely free. What a wonderful way to get into role-playing games, to get into the classic old school feel. Nothing better than free, right? And I just think, Chris is such a great guy. The team has done such a great job along with him. I just think this game is just absolutely awesome. They've got a lot of good products, adventure anthologies and adventures and a campaign and just a whole bunch of other things, supplements to add in unique things, even some supplements to add in almost some first and second edition feel kind of into it. It's a really, really good solid game. I just love the thing, and I can't wait to get our campaign kicked off and started with that with my family here soon. If you like this video, if this is something you want to hear more of, give me a thumbs up, certainly like that. Definitely subscribe, click the bell icon so you'll be notified when I upload new stuff. If you want to take a look at helping us out during this COVID time, we've got a PayPal tip jar. As always, take a look at that. You can also, I'll provide a link in there. You can buy me a cup of coffee, as it were, on Ko-fi.com. I'll put that down in the description as well, to help support continuing to make the videos here. Give a shout out to Rob's Game Group. You want to go check out his videos as well. I don't know if all of his are G-rated, but everything that I've watched so far has really been some good stuff. So thanks, Rob, for all of the good comments and all of the good videos you've been doing. He's a big, huge fan of Basic Fantasy Role-Playing Game as well. So check out his videos and his channel for that. And as always, thank you guys for listening. Thank you guys for following along. If this is something that you're interested in me continuing to do, say something about it in the comments so that I'll know that you're liking this and that you're wanting to do it. You're wanting me to continue to go through and do it and have some more commentary on it. I would appreciate the input and the feedback on there. If there's something that you don't like about it, let me know. I can try to make some changes and some tweaks. As always, thank you to everyone who has commented on my various videos, who has watched. One of the new subscribers, Willie Muffin, check out some of his stuff. He's been around since a little bit longer even than I have in my 40 plus years. I don't know that all of his channel is necessarily G-rated. I've not watched all of his videos, but he does a great job of reviewing and going all back into the history of first edition and second edition and coming forward, having been published in those realms as well in his past. As a GM for Gen Con and all kinds of things. And so that's just really cool. So check him out too. I don't know if I've forgotten to mention anybody else, but I think that'll be it for this one. Thanks again for tuning in, and I look forward to being able to catch you next time as we continue to talk back to basic about Dungeons and Dragons and role-playing games in general. I hope you'll really like this basic fantasy role-playing game. And as I always say, you play whatever is fun for you and your group. This is just my opinions. But I hope you guys go and you really have a great time and enjoy your gaming. And hey, may all your rolls be nat 20s. Take care.